The Charlotte Podcast Festival is presented by Blumenthal Performing Arts, the Queen City Podcast Network, Eclecs Creative Agency, and WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source, the home of acclaimed podcast Charlotte Talks, She Says, The List, Amplifier, Southbound, and FAQ City. Learn more about WFAE and our latest podcast, Work It, at WFAE.org.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Charlotte Podcast Festival, presented by WFAE, Queen City Podcast Network, Blumenthal Performing Arts, and Eclecs Creative Agency. My name is Joe Hunsaker, event manager, comedy producer at Blumenthal Performing Arts here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also a podcaster. I have three podcasts. In the Spotlight is the Blumenthal Performing Arts podcast. Also, I do a true crime podcast with my wife called American Timelines, as well as about to unleash a new podcast called Nerd School. So look out for that soon. This session is Audio Editing 101 Adobe Audition with Konata Edwards. On this session, we're going to learn how to record, edit, apply effects, and create your podcast with Adobe Audition audio editing software. This is an hour-long session. The last 15 or so will be Q&A, so if you have questions as we go, feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll keep track of them and ask them at the end. However, for this, if there are questions that are relevant to a certain screen or certain section that Konata's on, we'll go ahead and try to throw that in there. I will do my best to keep track and keep up with all the questions. So thank you guys for being here. This session will be recorded and made available as an archive session for those who have registered. You'll get that before the end of the month, emailed to you. And this will be a perfect one to have on record, so you can go back and reference anything as you learned. So this is great. Be sure to check out our full list of sessions on the Charlotte Podcast Festival website, charlottepodcastfestival.com, and share about this session on social media using hashtag CLTPodcastFest. Individuals can also purchase from the website a wonderful Charlotte Podcast Festival t-shirt that looks like this. It's got a little WFAE logo, got some logos on the back. It's really comfortable, soft, it's really nice. So go ahead and support the Podcast Festival by buying one of these shirts. Represent all over where you are. We have people today from all over the world, so we're excited that you're all here. So let's just jump into it, shall we? Shall we jump right into? Let's introduce our speaker today. He is the co-host and producer of Locked On Hornets, the producer and host of Charlotte Newsmakers, the post-production manager of Queen City Podcast Network. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Konata Edwards. Take it away, Konata.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Joe. I was looking behind me to make sure that again, that intro was so good, I thought there was an actual celebrity behind me. So thank you for that very, very, very much. Hello, everybody. Again, you're probably wondering, and I guess before we even get started, you're probably wondering, why am I going to learn Adobe Audition? It's probably, of the options that you have, the most expensive, and yet at the same time, it's probably one of those, again, because not everybody's used to making a monthly payment on a software. I am here to explain to you why this is probably the spot where this is like, probably if you want to get into podcasting, you want to learn everything, again, Adobe Audition is probably where you're going to want to go and why you're going to want to do this. To give you some background, my background is in Adobe Audition. I started this back when I was doing stuff at the Carolina School of Broadcasting, when I first learned all of this, and this was back in 2013, 2014, because at this time, Adobe Audition had been the industry standard in terms of basically everything that everyone was going to do. So if you're talking about, again, turning around an interview, it was done in Audition. You were talking about doing a, just everybody, again, Cool Edit Pro, like Kim Fox is bringing up, Cool Edit Pro was literally the beginning of this. So Adobe Audition has been here from the beginning. And for me, it's the easiest one to necessarily turn around an audio file in. It's probably the only one I would trust when it comes to creating a podcast. I would probably recommend this. And so because of that, I love this. This is literally like using my right hand. And before we get started, I would probably tell you that, again, if you have again, please stop me if there's anything that you're like confused about or anything in the steps that we have going forward. Like literally as we go, just let me know what we got to do to get you guys ready, get you guys as understanding of this as possible. This is not to basically confuse you. This is not to like dissuade you from using this. I want you guys excited to use this. And again, ask as many questions, anything in steps that I've missed. If we miss the question, we will get to it 12:40, 12:45 in the last little bit, because I know there are going to be questions, because unfortunately, I am going to confuse you probably. But let's get this started. Let me start sharing the screen. Let's start by sharing the screen. And we are going to get into what I love as Adobe Audition. Now you're seeing this untitled session. So let's start this. Let's go back, because I think this is the very. Can you hear me? Oh. So let's see this. Now, let me, one sec, let me see. All right, perfect. So where we're at, I'm gonna move this back just a little bit. We're gonna go back a little bit. And now you see a blank screen. This is the blank screen that you are going to see no matter what. This is literally just how you're gonna see. Again, when you click Adobe Audition, this is what you're gonna see. Blank screen and basically nothing. So what we're gonna do is I'll teach everybody, and again, whether it's a class like this or if I'm teaching someone one-on-one, I will tell everybody, you're gonna go to New, and you're gonna go to the multi-track. There's gonna be I'll explain why in a little bit, why you're gonna always start with multi-track, but we're just gonna go. If you have nothing, essentially, if you have nothing to do, again, if you have nothing, you don't have any templates set, again, you're gonna have your session name, you're gonna have your folder location. Your folder location is important because this is where all your projects are going to go. So when we start talking about where you wanna locate all your podcast files, so every single episode that you have, everything is going to be in one folder. So let's say you have let's say you're recording 2 or 3 times a week. So let's say there's a mistake that you wanna edit really quickly. You're gonna be able to find it in your folder locations. Your templates, these are going to be, again, a lot of these are the standard that you have. You'll see I have a Locked On Hornets one that I do. Charlotte Newsmakers isn't in here as much anymore. I have another podcast that I produce called for Vox called the ACC podcast. I have that template set up, and I will teach you how to set up those templates. But a lot of these are a bunch of the basic formats that you're going to see when we start talking about templates. The 24-track, the empty studio session. A lot of these you're not going to need. And then let's get into the sample rates. Now, again, a lot of this is going to be the audio nerd stuff that most people don't care about, but you should partially care about because this is going to determine file size. File size matters because when you have these things like sample rate, 16-bit mono, that is basically going to be your standard when it comes to recording everything. It keeps the file size low, and at the same time, it gives off a great sound quality, because as I will continue to tell you, and if you get to know me, you will know this about me just ad nauseum. This is one of those situations, like a sound quality situation is the most key part to any podcast. Most likely, if I'm going to listen to your podcast, it better sound halfway decent, and I cannot be messing with the volume too much, because otherwise, if I have to mess with the volume or if something sounds distorted, then I'm most likely not going to end up listening to your podcast at the end of the day. So what we're going to do, so we just have an untitled session, or you know what, we'll be kind of creative with this. We're going to call this the Podfest. All right, CLT Podfest session. And I do stuff one word, and just like something that I do because I tend to be like really detailed about this, and I've gotten better as I've worked more in the business. I always do month, which is 10, 15, 20, 20. So that way, no matter what, I have something organized by date to be readily available. So let's say I have like I said, there's a mistake that I made on the day I recorded on the 15th. I can easily go back. I can easily go back and make that edit and then make that correction. And no one is generally the wiser, except for the person that brings up said audio mistake. So after we're all done, we're just going to hit that beautiful OK button. And it sets up this giant default setting of a podcast. Now you're probably wondering, okay, this is all well, fine and good. I have a multi-track, but if I want to start a podcast, how do I basically set up this podcast? I'm glad you asked, because what you can do, you have your input, again, these track settings right here. You have your gain button for this, which your volume button, which will turn up the volume on the specific tracks. You have your input, your default stereo input, which again, for this, you don't necessarily need. You have a stereo input. And then you have your master track, which it means that as soon as you mix this, all of this is going to go in your master track. So what I'm going to do is you're going to have, and also this is another key thing. With these things, you have a mute, you have a solo, and then you have a record button with this. So when you go along with this, again, mute the track so that no matter what you do, and then again, this is more important for your editing sessions than it is actually recording. You have a solo track so that when you're recording, you're just solo focused on this track and this track alone. All the others will be muted. And then you have your arming button, which as you see now, you see that lovely little, again, right here, see that lovely button? It is registering all of my audio. So what we're gonna do per se is we're gonna do something. I'm gonna fire this off and I'm gonna hit this record button right here. So I'm just gonna say, hello, welcome to PodFest. We are learning something about Adobe Audition. This does not sound very cool. I probably am, again, embarrassing myself, again, for a 1 million hit video later. And this is what we're gonna do to teach you something about editing and the cold open.
Hey, Konata, we got a quick question from Brandon.
Sure.
When recording from two mics going into the same soundboard, how do you separate their audio into separate audio tracks?
That is a very good question, and thank you, Brandon. For a multi-track setting, and this is where the board matters, because how your board setup is going to go. Like for me, I only have this one microphone that you guys can't see right now. But if you have a second mic, it's always going to be in this mono or stereo input. So you see like Yeti stereo microphone. How your microphone sets up is basically, again, if you have a board and you can split channels, that is actually let me set this up. Where you're most likely going to see this, Control-Shift-K. You see this audio hardware button right here? There's an audio channel mapping. And for file channels, and especially if you have a board, you are going to be able to basically say, okay, stereo, again, microphone 1, microphone 2, your input, your default stereo input channels are going to be determined by that. So if you have two mics, you're going to have a stereo microphone there on the board for 1, you're going to have 2. It's just basically about mapping it. But when you get to the recording part, it's literally just choosing your inputs. Microphone 1, microphone 2, and arming these. Because for again, obviously these things are tethered to the same microphone. If I had a different microphone, like let's say, again, the computer I'm using has a second USB channel. If I had a second USB channel, I would be able to plug in a second mic. I would worry about the bleed in from it, but again, I would worry about the bleed in from the other microphones. But what you could theoretically do is I could plug a second one in, go into this input, choose this, and then fire off that second track. Why that matters is because, again, for my money, when I have those boards, when I have, like, if I'm recording two people in the same place, multi-track recording is probably going to be the thing that I want to do, because otherwise it's a lot harder to edit. And I'm going to show you why, per se, that it's basically a lot of this is going to be the easier you make it for yourself in pre-production and recording, there's a lot less work you have to do in the edit session. And because otherwise, I will tell you, I've been doing this for the better part of 5-6 years, mainly on Audition. I've gotten to the point where it takes me maybe 90 minutes to do a 45-minute podcast, like hardcore, make sure everything's even, and go from there. Now,
Konata,
since I have this beautiful, yes.
Sorry, real quick. What about recording from your microphone and from Zoom or Skype simultaneously for an interview?
For the big thing for me on this, for that, mic and Zoom, I get why some folks would want to do that from mic and from Zoom. The Zoom, for me, like, again, this is one of the big things about Audition. When you start working enough with Audition, you will trust the Zoom recording, because a lot of the stuff that you don't trust in other programs per se, when it comes to editing, everything is going to be, again, you can edit out a lot of the things really, really quickly, really, really easily, just off the Zoom recording and make it sound professional. That is one of the appeals to the Zoom process for me, to the Adobe Audition process for me. And I will actually, I'll show you an example right quick, because the really, really cool thing about Adobe Audition is something I like to call the effects rack. And the effects rack makes everything simple, because again, one of the big things is they have a lot of presets ready to go. So let's say you need something to do for a podcast. Okay. And this is literally just my podcast voice. Now, what I can especially do right now is I will hit. So actually, no, let's get rid of it. So now you notice that my input, let me turn this off right quick. Let me unarm that. So I can show you, I'm going to hit a spacebar. So I'm just going to say, hello, welcome to Podfest. We are learning something. So now you heard that piece. I want to show you what it sounds like without it armed. So let's say I don't want to do this. Let's go back to the default, which is nothing. So you're going to hear this. So I'm just going to say, hello. You notice how it's a lot less welcome to Podfest, right? We are learning something about, so we'll go back through there. And we'll go back and let's go through that podcast voice right back on. So I'm just going to say, hello, welcome to Podfest. We are learning. Now, if there's certain things that are too strong for you, then what we're going to do, what you can do, is you can start tweaking with this. So let's say I don't like the reverb that you might have heard in the background. Okay, I'm going to turn the speech leveler off. So I'm just going to say, hello, it's still there. But so, okay, clearly it's not that. Let's try denoise. So I'm just going to say that actually didn't help either. So we're going to, again, that made it sound stronger. The idea is that you are going to continually, again, the best thing about this is that this gives you options. Now, let's say I don't want to necessarily mess with a preset, but I want to go do something else. You always have your amplitude and compression. This is where you're going to go from jump. Most likely anything that you're going to have an issue with the podcast is going to be involved in your amplification. Multi-band is one of my favorites because, again, it'll give you this broadcast setting.
Konata, can you do that again? We have a couple of people saying, one's asking, what effect are you using? And somebody else said, Akira said her effects rack doesn't show that. Can you do that again?
Sure, I can show you that. Again, let me go clear this out because it'll go to custom right quickly. All right, let's take a look. All right, so what I'm going to do is you have presets available to you. Now, mind you, if you don't have this, then what I would recommend, probably update to the latest setting again, because a lot of this came in the last 2 years of Adobe Audition, where they've made it super simple for you to basically give away your sound. You have a preset called Podcast Voice. This is going to give you a whole bunch of compressors, levelers, hard limiters, which again are some of my favorites. This makes it sound, again, this will make your sound pop. And again, a lot of this, after a while, again, you start with these presets, you will find stuff and again, get in there, tweak, make it easy for you to basically learn everything you need to. So we're going to again, basically go back through here, check your denoise, your speech volume limiter, dynamics processor, your equalizer, your hard limiter. But again, that's the default setting. That's the podcast voice setting. What you can do is default and find something that works for you.
Do you apply these presets in post or pre-production?
Absolutely post. Absolutely post. I do not do these until afterwards, because a lot of these, if you do them before, it's going to tweak the recording to where it's either going to be too strong or too weak. Always do these in post. Always do these in post but again, when I say always do these in post, this also assumes that what you're recording from, what you're doing is already strong enough as is to begin with. So if you don't feel like your audio is strong enough, then probably what I would recommend for you to do is make sure that everything that you have set. So make sure that your audio is set, default, and go from there. Make sure that everything that you do pre-production, if you learn nothing else from me, make sure your pre-production is set, because nothing I do for you after this, like nothing I do after you're done recording, can help you, can save you. Make sure everything is set, because otherwise it's a lot easier to tweak than it is to fix grand amount of things. So one big thing, and I'll probably, again, how I choose, again, I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm going to hide that though. Command Z, undo, because that would have been a mistake. But I'm going to hide this. Yes.
Hey, Konata, is there a couple people, we talked about this. This is sort of a beginning session, so some people are kind of having some trouble. So Stephanie asks, is there a list of suggested presets for this that we can start with?
Absolutely. The preset, if you have the software, that I would absolutely recommend is the podcast voice.
Okay.
Start there, start tweaking from there. If not, again, podcast or radio announcer voice. The radio announcer one is a little bit simpler, a lot less to tweak. Start probably radio announcer voice or podcast voice. The idea is start there. Your sound will be excellent and you will be okay.
Can you show the settings on the individual effects in the podcast voice effects, so we can see adaptive noise reduction,
sure,
speech
no
volume,
problem.
all that, so everybody can get a feel for what that looks like?
All right, no problem. So we'll start with the podcast voice. You see a denoise. If you want to understand the nuances of everything prior to what this does, I'm going to get this back on. You double click. So you notice how there's a custom. So what I would probably, and again, the really cool thing is when you get there, you can do this. And so I'm just going to say hello, hello. So you can focus on the amount. The idea is that, again, these are all rack effects, and this is just going to affect how your output noise is going to be. So processing focus. A lot of these are going to be things that are maybe a little bit more advanced, but when you get to that point where you feel comfortable, okay, I can feel like I can play with this, that, and the third, start messing with these things. Processing focus on all the frequencies, focus on the lower frequencies. The lower frequencies are going to be more of a bass type sound. So if I want to take some of the bass off my voice, I just hit the lower frequencies and then we'll listen. So I'm just going to say hello, hello. Again, it adds a little bit more treble and then goes from there. So we got the rack effect for that. We're going to go back to this. A lot of these speech volume leveler, they also have presets involved in this as well. So a lot of this is going to be, if you feel like something's off on them, double click, speech volume leveler goes right there. Your dynamics processing is going to be set on a broadcast setting most likely. Yeah. A lot of these are going to be broadcast level limiters. So you're going to, again, a lot of these have their own little presets within them so that you can completely get to the point where you feel comfortable using them. The idea is a lot of this is not necessarily, a lot of this is experimentation. And you're going to end up with a lot of mistakes, but some of those are going to be really happy mistakes that you're going to be like, cool, I have my voice. It may take you a little bit. It took me a year to feel comfortable with basically being able to edit. This is not going to be one of those things like quick grits. This is going to be a lot of sweat equity. This is going to be a lot like, I'm here to show you the tools. I'm Prometheus bringing you fire. And from there, you go from there, you get to learn what to do and get to love this just as much as I do. Because again, I love this program. This program makes everything easy for me in the long run, and it saves you time. Parametric equalizer, again, check the preset. What's going on, Joe?
Oh, I got a couple of questions. I'm trying to keep up with the questions. Hey, watch what you do. Camille has a big question. Should you use the Sound Essentials or the Effects Rack?
The Effects Rack.
Okay.
Absolutely the Effects Rack. And the big thing that one advanced trick, and I probably should show you this one right now, is you don't necessarily, remember how I said tracks go into the master? There's another way to do this so that you have your voice tracks go one way, your music tracks go straight to the master, because most likely the music tracks that you use, obviously copyright free, are going to matter. Is you're going to go to track, you're going to right click, because again, right click will basically save you on any, again, right click is going to be your tools. So you're going to go to track and then add mono bus track, because we are recording in mono. And then what you're going to do from there is all your audio. Again, let's see. Hold on. It should feed. Oh, I'm sorry. No, wrong one. This is going to feed into that bus A track. Why this matters is, let's say you are wanting to get that bus A, and you're just wanting to make sure that your audio tracks are getting the podcast thing, but you don't want the music thing, and it ends up over mixing. The big thing for this is that you can have just your audio tracks sound good, and then at the same time, have your music track down here unbothered. So a lot of the effects that you're gonna do, you're gonna learn, make it easier. And if you have too many tracks, or you feel like you don't have, again, it's overwhelming, the biggest thing that I probably would tell you is to delete tracks. Now, again, you go delete, again, right click, and delete selected track. And you see how it's just making eliminating some of the clutter. And right click and delete selected track. Right click, delete selected track. There's a way to do all the empty tracks. That's something that I would tell you to do once you're sure, okay, I have 2 tracks for audio and then 1 for music, and go from there. That's something I would tell you to do. But to make everything a little bit, once you have as many tracks as you need, so if you need 3 audio tracks and the music track, and then the master track, once you have all that set, all you do is you see this lovely little button right here. You're going to click that, and it's going to full access. And again, you have your workspace. That's nice. It's not overwhelming. Joe, you look like you have a question.
No, I was just going to say, since we're getting so many questions and we're running short on time, we'll let you just continue, finish showing the basics of bring your podcast to life, and then we'll save the rest of the questions for the end. We'll try to get as many as possible.
No problem. Yeah. I'll keep going for about 8 more minutes.
Okay.
So what we're going to
all the questions. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
What we're going to do from here is I'm going to, again, add some music to this. And what we're going to do is add a music track. And this is going to be some of the fun stuff that we do right here. Because again, this is a 13-minute track, and I'm going to throw it right there. So once I zoom this out, it's going to be a little bit too much. So I need to make sure that my music is set for here. All right, let me actually make sure that this turns into the podcast thing. Get rid of this to default. because otherwise it's going to end up over mix. But you see that, again, once I hit that M on there, that's going to end up being you're not going to hear it, so that all I hear is the music. And that's the important thing, because when I'm trying to figure out the cold open or an intro, all I'm going to do is just hear the music. And for what I'm just trying to do and trying to say, I'm going to cut right here. You notice how there's that nice little bar? That is the volume bar. It's a default volume bar for the track. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to go here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to bring this down. And again, that bar is set at 0.0. That means that's the way the track naturally sounds. So I'm going to bring this down. Bring this down again. I'm going to get another button. Bring this down. Make this even. And again, so we're going to listen to this one more time. And you notice how it's a little bit softer now. So the reason why I did that is because when I mix this in, we're going to hit play. You're going to go back. So I'm just going to say, hello. You notice how, welcome to PodFest. We are learning something about Adobe Audition. So you notice how basically it flows a little bit. My vocals are a little bit too high. So what I'm going to do, and this is something that thankfully Adobe Audition has added, there are two ways that you can edit this. My favorite way is that if my vocals are going to be too strong through the whole track, I'm going to just turn this. You see that volume button that I showed you earlier? I am going to turn this down just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to say, hello. Welcome to PodFest. We are learning something. And that's it. That is what I'm going to do for your intro.
Is that preloaded music or
that is music that I have found on the internet. It is copyright-free music. There is a spot for this. Again, the big thing whenever you're doing music or you're trying to add a musical intro, find the copyright-free music. And I believe there's an entire session on this going on for. Again, there's an entire session. There is, and I think Landis is doing it, if I'm not mistaken. So when we have all these things, get copyright-free music. Yeah. Copyright-free music. And then we're at the point where we can go and make this happen. So
you can click on that yellow line, right? That runs through the clip to adjust your levels. Yeah. Okay.
You can absolutely click to adapt so if I feel like the music is too high and I zoom in a little bit, I can click. Double clicking is going to put you in this. That's actually an important thing. Double clicking on the track itself is going to basically put you in just the waveform mode, which you do not want to mess with, because if you mess with stuff in waveform mode, any changes that you will make to the file will be permanent. So everything you do in a podcast, again, everything you do when it comes to editing, to recording, do it all in multi-track, because at least if you make a mistake, you can reload it. That is a very important step that I'm sorry that I didn't get to. Anything, again, edit, no matter what you do, edit in waveform, edit in multi-track. Everything that you do going forward, edit in multi-track, because that way, if anything goes wrong, you will not lose your work. So we're going to get back to that.
Yeah, I was going to say undo still works, right? Like somebody
Control
mentioned.
Control Z is going to be your best friend. The other thing is, and thank you for bringing that up, Joe.
Yeah, well, somebody mentioned, I was thinking it as they were saying it. So yeah.
Control Z is going to be your best friend. In fact, hold on one sec. Let me So what you're going to do in terms of is just move it further down. So now it's going to sound a lot lower. So I'm just going to say hello, like that. So the big thing is you're going to want to mix this out. So once you get to the point where you feel like, okay, I have enough for editing everything else out, I don't need the rest of this 13-minute track, I'm going to hit that delete button, get rid of this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on my volume. And you see how it says fade out? What you're going to do is you're going to take that tail, and you have two choices. You can fade it out like linearly, or what I choose to do is fade it out a little bit more gradually. And this takes a lot. Again, this is where 90% of your time in editing is going to basically be taking place, where you're going to be in a spot where, okay, I'm in the cold open. So you notice how it fades out just a little bit. And again, it may fade out a little bit quicker for your taste. It may not fade out for a little bit. So let's try it like this. The closer to the bottom that line will get, like you see the closer to the line that bottom, that's the faster it's going to fade out. So it allows you for your tracks to basically, that's the speed of the fade out. That is a very important thing because as soon as you hit that fade out, you can put your recorded tracks in and it sounds great. Now, you're probably wondering at this point, I've done all this stuff. I've done all this work with mixing, editing, what have you. How do I export this? Glad you asked. This is a very, very simple, again, this is another reason why I love Adobe Audition, is all you got to do is go to multi-track, mix down session to new file, entire session, click that, and boom. That is your file mixed down to where it is just one file. So I'm just going to say, hello, welcome to PodFest. And now you have yourself a podcast intro, but even if that was just a waveform and I just wanted to mix down everything, that is going to be your entire mix. This is going to be from soup to nuts, whatever you happen to do. Now, going back, one thing I do want to show you guys before we get to questions, because again, we're running out of time. I will show you something that is very, very important. The razor blade tool. This is going to be one of those things that, again, I am one of those that believes in editing everything that's imperfect out. So let's say I don't like half of this. Welcome to PodFest. We are learning something about Adobe Audition. So let's say I don't like this part about, we are learning something about Adobe Audition. We're going to hit that razor blade tool. I'm going to get rid of all of this. And then I'm going to drag this right here. It's probably not going to make any sense. But what you're going to do. So I'm just going to say, hello, probably. But again, none of it makes sense. But the idea is your razor blade tool for each individual track is probably the best way you're going to be able to edit things in, edit things out. And at the same time, so that's why I keep saying, let's say you have some audio let's say you have a section of your podcast that you just you decide, you know what, that's not fit for air. That's going to get me canceled, whatever. That's the best way to do it, is to just mark up your tracks, which again, matter of fact, I'll do this, Control Z, get rid of all that. Yeah, make that track.
Yeah, can you show us where the razor blade is again?
You're going to hit the R button. Again, a lot of these, hit the R button. For the regular timeline thing, you're going to hit the T button. So that way you're not accidentally slicing up your own tracks. Welcome to R button for that. Again, R and T are basically going to be the buttons that you're going to need the most. R, T, Control Z. Those are probably going to be, the rest of the hotkeys are going to be used as needed. I would highly recommend learning all of the hotkeys, because if not, you're going to find yourself in a situation where something is going to go wrong. And basically, as someone taught me, once you learn the hotkeys, a 2-hour edit job turns into, it can legitimately cut your edit time by an hour minimum. So learning hotkeys, learning all of this stuff is exactly where I would spend most of my time when I start recording podcasts, because learning hotkeys, again, Control Z, T, R. But one more thing I do want to show you. So let's say there's a part that you don't really like, and as you're recording. So let me do this. I will show you. I'll show you guys this right quick. Let's see if, okay, good. We're good. All right, turn this off. We're not recording on that. So this part of the audio I don't necessarily like, but here I'm going to insert this instead. So I'm going to say, let's re-record this and make this sound pretty good. And we're going to insert this into a spot we are more comfortable with. The idea, again, the markers that I've just shown you, when we start talking about markers, this is going to be the stuff, like, let's say there's a spot that you want to do, or when you get to the part where you want to do show notes. Markers are the biggest key to help you maintain, okay, this is where we talked about this. This is where we talked about that. This is where we talked about this. And they also help for edits. So let's say you're doing a narrative podcast or storytelling podcast. Okay, here's this scene that I want to work on today. It's a lot easier to work with the markers. And if for those that want to understand more about the markers, you double click on them, hit edit point 1, and edit point 2. Again, to go over this, just edit. Again, double click the marker, that's the first marker that you've chosen. Double click it, and then you can type. And then the second one, edit point 2. A lot of this will help you when we start talking about, a lot of this will generally help you when we start talking about getting into the point of, okay, this is what my show notes are. That way I can take my show notes from working on the show minutes from like, it'll take you maybe 10 minutes to 30 seconds. So, okay, we talked about this, this, and this, and summarize it. And then also put those edit points of, we talked about this and this. I have given you guys a lot of information. I apologize greatly. I think maybe we need to get to some questions because I know you guys have a ton of them, and I will answer them as necessary.
Yes, I got a lot, and from the chat, and some of these might be ones we were kind of already talking about. So let's just start from the beginning. What are some free VST plugins you would recommend, both free and subscription based? Akira asks.
The beautiful thing about Audition is most of them already come with what you're trying to do. But if you want some subscription-based ones, I would probably recommend going to Isotope. Isotope is, again, I've recommended this for Audacity. I've recommended this in Common Audio Mistakes. Isotope is probably the best. They're always running sales. It'll run you anywhere from $30 to $100. But those, again, especially if you are interested in taking your podcast to the next level, I highly, 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 highly recommend taking Isotope and going from there and buying those. Those are the main ones. You're going to figure out what works for you and go from there.
Okay. How many hours did it take you when you first started? Molly asked.
The length. For a 45-minute podcast, to do it professionally, it started taking me about 3 hours. And then I started really working on it. I started taking time to just really work on it and work on my craft and hone my craft. I would probably tell you, give yourself a year. And most importantly, in any editing software, and this goes for anything, be patient with yourself. Be patient. Because if not, you are going to get frustrated. You are going to quit. And that's not the thing you want to do if you want to put your podcast out there. Like, the big thing for this is going to be keep practicing. This is, again, it's like that old line at Carnegie Hall. How do you get there? Practice, practice, practice. So it's going to be one of those situations where I highly, 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 highly recommend you practice. It's not going to be one of those things you notice in a month, or again, it's one of those things you're going to notice every 3 months. Like, oh my God, this 45-minute podcast that used to take me 3 hours took me 90 minutes. Like, it's, again, highly practiced. Again, if you really love this, you will absolutely learn how to knock this out.
That's cool. Okay. Camille wants to know about your mic. She noticed you have a Yeti mic.
Yes.
And she said the gain is tricky. How far do you turn your gain on the mic itself?
Quite honestly, I do it. Quite honestly, I leave it at the lowest setting. Because It is extremely strong, especially when it comes to Zoom. The big thing is, and this is where it gets kind of interesting when we start talking about Zoom, because again, Zoom can be used for reference tracks, but we can also figure out ways to, like I said, if you want to record individual tracks, you just go to the regular track, record your audio along with Zoom, and use Zoom as the reference point. That's one big thing that I would do. But in terms of Zoom, like recording personally, as low as possible, because it is extremely strong and it'll pick up anything if you're not careful.
Okay, got you. Can Audition record audio from a website on my computer? From Steve
No,
Thomas.
that is, again, unless you have a mixer, the answer will be no. Unfortunately, that's where Hindenburg has, that's one of the few advantages Hindenburg has it has an advantage on everybody, is that it's the only software you can record from the web from.
Okay, speaking of Hindenburg, does that have the podcast voice effect? Amarachi wants to know.
I do not know about, again, podcast. I do not believe it does. I think it is a lot. Again, one of those things like, again, Hindenburg I'm a little bit less familiar with, but okay. I would tell you what I would probably do with Hindenburg, because again, it also costs, but it also is a set price. I would probably go about this the way I would probably do, at least record everything. Again, record what you need from the folder, from the web, as long as it's not like copyrighted music. Copyrighted music, I am not going to be out here telling you to go do, because again, I don't want you guys coming back to me saying, hey, I got a DMCA notice about my podcast and I got to take it down. You told me to record everything. What I would tell you to do, and again, there are a lot, again, in the chat, there seems to be a lot of programs that'll help you download stuff from the web. But if you're talking about using stuff from press conferences per se, you want to use stuff from other things other than copyrighted things, then yeah, a lot of what's in the chat will probably help you out in terms of that.
Okay. Mark wants to know, if you're using a bus, do you apply the effects to the bus or to the individual voice track?
Effects to the bus, and then direct everything to the bus. Effects to the bus, because again, that way you're not over modulated, because again, it'll sound distorted and no one will want to listen to your podcast.
Okay. Alyssa wanted to know, well, it might be already too late, but she wanted to review cutting the track items and what it means in Adobe's referencing of other files.
Cutting track items. Okay, let's see. I will go back to share the screen.
Let me see if we can answer all the ones without demonstrating first.
Okay, no problem.
Somebody wants to know where you find the presets for podcast voice. You can demonstrate that. We did the music question. And how do you create keyframes in your audio track for volume adjustment? Did we do that already?
I think, again, keyframes is a little bit... Keyframes is something I don't do. A lot of the stuff I do for general, like my general rule for a lot of this is make sure that your voice, again, it's nice and it's balanced, and then go from there. I don't necessarily do keyframes per se. That's more of a video thing, and that's more of an intensive like video podcast thing.
Gotcha.
That's one of those, like, I would actually practice probably on my own. Like, again, understand it, and then there's a whole bunch of ways to do that.
Okay, 2 quick questions before we get to demonstrations. Is there a target loudness, Mark wants to know, in LUFs that you recommend?
Yeah, -6 to -18. That is my range. That is absolutely my range. I would absolutely, that is my way of saying, okay, that's a normal conversation. That is something that I wouldn't have to hit the volume button on if one track's too high, one track's too low, yada, yada, yada.
-6 to -18.
-6 to -18 is probably where I would go.
That's a big range. It seems like a big range, isn't it?
It's a big range. It's a smaller range than you think.
Okay.
And more importantly, like, the big thing about it is, like, as if you're in that range, you can basically, again, it's not too loud. Again, all you're trying to do is make sure that it's semi-even, and that way no one has to mess with the loudness on it per se.
Okay. Reed wants to know, what are good effects to enhance a telephone interview?
Ooh, that is a good one.
Yeah, that's a great question.
That is a really good question. Normalize is one. A lot of it is going to be broadcast. Again, going to the multiband and using a broadcast compressor. That's going to probably be your best way, and then just tweak and cut, and tweak and cut, and tweak and cut. Because, quite honestly, that is a tough one for me. That is always a tough one.
By the way, thanks to all the people that are helping answer some of the questions.
Yes.
That's really helpful. There's a lot of people helping out. I really appreciate that. Yeah, these are great. So yeah, if you want to demonstrate what you were gonna, because some people want to know the beginner.
So how to cut?
Yeah. What was it? The cutting. Review cutting the track items.
Yeah, let me go cut.
And Reed couldn't.
All right.
He didn't know where the presets for podcast voice were. I guess we did that.
I will show you where you get that podcast voice one more time. We're going to do this on the bus track, but you see podcast voice. You're going to go to your effect. You're going to go to the browser, podcast voice. You're going to go through the presets. It's going to be at the bottom again, podcast voice, and you're going to go from there. And a lot of this is going to take a little bit of searching and going from there. But podcast voice. Now, to cut something in per se, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute or using just straight up razor blade and cutting per se like that. Or are you, again, for the person that asked that question, are you talking more about cutting like from an actual audio track or from the actual source track from it? Or are you talking more about cutting something into the conversation later? Because again, I think
Alyssa, that was Alyssa's question.
Hey, I just thought it'd be good because I think there are a lot of beginners in here to just review the actual basics of cutting, using shortcuts like Command K and actually piecing some of the dialogue together. Just watching the chat, I think people are getting confused.
Yeah.
All right, no problem. Yeah. All right, so Command K, absolutely. So a lot of it, again, cutting for me at least, is a lot of this is going to be just razor blade in and remove and then place right there. And the idea is I'm going to, again, make sure that the fade in is actually quasi-normal, and then so that it sounds like it's a natural conversation, and then go from there. And then mute this track, obviously, because again, it's our bonus track. And then I'm just gonna say hello, hello, part of the, and again, the idea is for a natural conversation, that's gonna be the way to cut something into your conversation to add or bonus or to add some more context in case you missed something on that, I hope I answered that question properly, because if not.
Yeah, there were so many. Somebody else, one other thing I think we missed was somebody asked where you open markers from.
Okay, markers are also going to be, let me show you that right quick as well. Markers are also going to be on your effects rack browser. So you have media browser, you're going to click, again, you have your files right here.
Yeah.
You have your effects rack right here. The right next one is your markers.
Markers right there, okay.
And then as always, you click on your markers to edit. Double click and then type. So that's the way I generally, as I'm recording, if I'm recording in this, if I'm just getting audio tracks sent to me, it's a little bit harder, but again, and then if you're editing as you go, then you add those markers in for the timepieces. So that's the way I generally do the marker, again, marking up.
Yeah, that's great. There's Konata, great job. I mean, thanks a lot. It is difficult to keep something like this for beginners and advanced and go back and forth. And there's a lot of everybody's varying ranges. So I think generally it was good. And a lot of questions from people were, is this going to be recorded? And just a reminder, yes, it'll all be recorded. If you're registered and you're in here, you will get it emailed to you before the end of the month. So, and the chat comes with it. So you'll be able to see all that. Yeah.
Yeah. That, how many more, again, we got 3 minutes.
I think we got most of the questions. I mean, it was so fast and furious, and thanks to all of you that helped answer the questions.
Yeah, seriously,
that's really appreciated.
Like the community has been really, really dope in terms of this, and like everybody.
Yeah, it was great. So don't forget to order your shirt like this. Thanks, Konata. I think we're just about out of time. We got like 2 minutes, but yeah, I think everybody, thanks everybody. I think everybody got good stuff. I think we generally covered everything. Might have missed a question or two. That wasn't on purpose. It's kind of hard to keep up with all that, but keep registering for sessions. Thanks everybody. Thanks for being here. Check out the happy hours on Friday. You'd be surprised how supportive that community is. But Konata, anything else to end on?
Basically, if you guys have any further questions, feel free to either DM. Again, I'm on Twitter at Nata the Scribe, NATATHECRIBE, and feel free to DM me and ask or whatever, and I will happily answer as many questions as possible. Again, I see someone asking, where's my podcast? I am on, basically for right now, I'm on Locked On Hornets for the, I'm on Locked On Hornets. I do the local Charlotte Hornets podcast. And in terms of just, again, everything else, I just took a job with WFAE, and all things considered, I've been here for about a week and a half. So everything involved, like literally anything that is, basically there will be some more podcasts. It just may be a little bit, I'm adjusting to all things considered. So once I get adjusted to all of that, then we will go from there. So literally, again, if you want to hear my podcast, again, if you love basketball, again, Locked On Hornets is basically where I would go. And then from there, again, if you need anything, feel free to DM me a question. Or again, another way to get in contact with me, and I will put my email in there, is KonataEdwards0@gmail.com. I'll answer as many questions as you need. And more importantly, if there are other resources, like Joe has said, there are videos that, again, this video will be out at the end of the month. And again, if you're interested in getting your podcast even further, please hit up Brian and everybody over at the Queen City Podcast Network. And again, that's the best way to go about that.
Yeah. I see Steve is saying Eventbrite is saying our events have ended. That only the past events are. The future ones should all be available to sign up for. So you should still be able to sign up for extra stuff. Konata's social media stuff is all in the chat. His podcast. Thanks, Joni, for putting it in there. And
thank you.
Your Twitter handle, everything else. So, and again, this will all be sent to you guys so you can check it out. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thanks, Konata. Let's hear it for Konata. Great job. We're all going to listen to your podcast and give you a bunch of reviews and all that. So thanks, everybody, for being here for the Charlotte Podcast Festival. Get your T-shirts, sign up, come back often. Thanks, everybody.